Alpha One Drop Zone presents Honoring Our Veterans, a series of interviewing our military veterans. Our purpose is to reconnect our country with our veterans and our history.
Hello, my name is Steve Gonzalez, Vice President of Marketing and Community Relations with Alpha One Drop Zone. We're honored today to interview one of our World War II veterans. His name is Gale Black. Gale Black served our country as a tank commander for Patton's Army. So at this time I would like to welcome Gale. So Gale, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve. It's my pleasure. I really like to mention Patton because I think he was the greatest general in our Army history. And I'm talking about U.S. Army history. He was just suffered from a kind of an awkward situation when he was in Sicily. He slapped a young private because he wasn't doing his duty, and Patton, he has a measure. You need to do your duty the best you can, and then I'll get along fine with you. Well, as a result of that, that came into news. And he was really blackballed from the military point of view, from Eisenhower right on down. And Patton was afraid he was going to be left out of World War II. As a result, all along, Eisenhower was preparing him for this Third Army that was yet to be organized. I didn't come into the Third Army until much later. I came into southern England. The Third Army was being formed there. I understood that Patton gave a rather patriotic speech to the few eligible people that were parts of this new army. I was not a part of the new army at this time. So you see, Patton had been kind of on a shelf ever since Sicily, and yet to be the June 6th engagement on Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, of which I'm a member, came ashore on Omaha Beach about, I'm going to say 15th of July. Remember, we entered there on June 6th. The troops of our troops were only roughly 6 miles in, and had Rommel been aware of the fact that there was danger in our staying, he was waiting on an okay to advance against the United States forces from Hitler himself. Hitler never gave the order. And as a result, when he finally did give the order, the 4th Armored was already there, and we were building up strength along with the 12th Army and the English British Army. So it wasn't Rommel's fault, but the fact that the German hierarchy did not do anything about pushing us off when they could, and the war would have been over, and we would have been defeated. Amazing things happened. I say, by the grace of God, that happened. The Nazi regime was going to be penalized, and God was going to see that it happened. And it happened through the United States and its allies. So for a while, I was at least 2 weeks in the hedgerows. And the hedgerows of Normandy were something you have to see, because if I describe it, some of those were so thick with dirt and rock and trees and roots and elevation up to 30 feet. Our tanks could not pierce them. So we were still trying to figure out how we were going to get out of the hedgerows. As a result, part of the 4th Armored Division, me being in the 10th Armored Infantry Battalion, was assigned to kind of a mop-up situation just to get our feet wet. I happen to be a grenadier. A grenadier is a fellow that has an M1 rifle with an attachment on the end that you could place a grenade or a small bomb and shoot it by using a blank load. And that was what I did, was try to wipe out German machine gun nests that we couldn't reach otherwise. Finally, it was devised by our engineers that we could, by attaching a kind of a fork situation on the front end of our tanks, we could work a hole through those hedgerows. And as a result, during all of these weeks, the British were flying over at night and bombing Saint-Lô. That's S-A-I-N-T, and then capital L-O. There's a village that was the head of the road that was the way escape out of the hedgerows. We finally got the American bombers to do it in daylight, because when the British come at night, the Jerrys, that's the Germans, would back off 2 or 3 miles, let them bomb, move back in at dawn, and wouldn't let us advance with our equipment. So the American Air Force, that was Army Air Force, started bombing Saint-Lô during the daytime. When I was passing through on my tank through Saint-Lô, there was nothing but rubble and a road. That's how bad they were destroyed at Saint-Lô. From there we went to a town called Avalanches. That is roughly 40 miles south and west of Saint-Lô. This area is called the Cherbourg area, where the Germans had a big underwater equipment for their equipment to bomb or to tornado our boats. And that had been eliminated by our military forces by using air as well as the Navy. But so when we got to the Cherbourg area, it was nobody there. Getting to Avalanche was a little bit harder, because to the south and east was a rather large hill. And on top of that hill, the Jerrys were entrenched, and they had their military power zeroed in on us, and we had to send a platoon of tanks up there to wipe that out before we could advance to Avalanche. After Avalanche, though, we went into a town called Le Mans, and there was a situation as we advanced east. All of this now is south of London, of Paris. As we were advancing east, all the little villages had churches with steeples. And we found out that the Jerrys were using those steeples as oversight to advance their military in whatever direction we were. Also sending their shells, field artillery shells in. So we learned a lesson. When we took a small village, our mission was to go right through that village and get on the other side hoping to shut off the advance of the Jerrys so our people then following us could mop up the area. But we always left the steeples. Not anymore. I had great fun. But elevating that old tank, 75 millimeter up there, pooey! There went a steeple. So we learned by lessons that even though our orders were to advance through, let the 35th Infantry come along and mop up where we did not. The 10th Armored Battalion, military battalion, of which is a part of the 4th Armored Division, never took prisoners. Our tanks were not situated for prisoners. We didn't take any prisoners. If they were there, we eliminated them. We killed them. We did that mostly by machine gun, but we didn't mop up the area. There are always ways of getting away from the roads and our tanks. Our mission was to go through, shut off, let our key people come in, wipe out. And the next big deal was what we called the Falaise Gap. F-A-L-A-I-S-E Gap. This was one of the biggest problems in our early arrangement of advancement. This was the order. Patton's 3rd Army was to advance from the south. Bradley and his 12th Army was to advance from the north and the west. Montgomery and the English Army was to advance from the further end on that. Patton had Bradley, Montgomery. We were to come like this and form a lock. Patton and the 3rd Army was able to advance quickly. Bradley was like Montgomery. He wanted to make sure his advance was taken care of properly. Patton said, we will advance and take. We will not worry about withdrawing. Bradley later made statements of my commander, which was General Patton, that give Patton 30 miles and he'll take another 10. He doesn't care about the casualties. That wasn't true. I'll admit that Patton was called old blood and guts by the military people a lot. They said, yeah, Patton's guts in our blood, but that was not true. Patton would rather lose 1 man now than 10 men later because he didn't take advantage of a situation that he had. Patton showed up at the Falaise Gap. The other 2 armies did not. As a result of that, Patton's army took a big rear-end spanking. We lost a lot of men. I'll admit Bradley didn't lose as many because he wasn't there. Montgomery didn't lose as many because he wasn't there. Later on, this is an actual fact, historical fact. Eisenhower said, had we taken Falaise Gap, there were 1 million German troops behind that gate, that circle. We would have had those men in captivity. That's how close Patton came to solving the ministry of getting into Berlin by Christmas, which he said he would do. He couldn't now because of the Falaise Gap. That's the biggest mistake made by our military. Well, then Patton went back to his route, which was south of Paris, in these orders. New Orleans was the first city that we came across. I call it New Orleans, but it wasn't. It was called Orleans, and that's a sister city of Wichita. Orleans, we were coming across a plain. The lorry, it's now, I have called it that. I learned this from my granddaughter, who caused me to write this article. She took French and spent 1 year in studying French in Orleans. And she said, "Grandpa, you need to call towns by the correct name. That's Orleans. And that's not the Lorry River, it's the Loire River Valley." So I learned to speak a little French that way, but that was the most beautiful occasion that I can talk about, because I can tell you how we did it. Our tanks are always first with Patton. Behind them come the half tracks with the men, the 10th Armored Infantry Battalion men on those. One tank, 2 half tracks. My platoon was made up of 10 platoons, 10 tanks in the platoon. And I'm not sure that we only had our full capacity of 10 tanks at the beginning when we left St. Lo, and then again when we restarted, which I'll tell about later on. But I know we had 8 tanks that time, so I'm going to say we probably had 16 half tracks. With a couple of squads of guys on the. We took across that valley coming from the northwest. The Loire River was here, and the bridge we were trying to get across was probably a mile away. We took off in full blast. I mean, our tanks will go 35 miles an hour. That's why we could beat the German Panthers and Tigers. The Panthers and Tigers were twice our size, and they were lumbering, slow deals. So we would run around on the back and shoot off their stuff, their weak side, or get their tracks. But anyway, we moved into there. We took across that bridge, didn't fire one shot at Orleans, and took the city. Can you believe that?
That's hard to believe.
That's hard to believe, but that's what the 4th Army, that's what Patton does. Patton is there fast. I know that the Jerrys were not assured. We saw them there. Yeah, the 35th Infantry Division came along there, and they had a bonanza of captives. The Germans, the ones they could run and get away in the hills, did, but the rest of them, and they were, you just round them up and put them in captivity. New Orleans, that's something. Next town was Sens, S-E-N-S, and that was another deal that was caught by surprise. Because in that particular occasion, I know that the communication lines were cut because the Jerrys that were at Orleans had no way of letting Sens know we were coming. So when we moved into Sens, it was a holiday or a Sunday, one of the two, or it could have been the same. The Jerrys and visitors were all dressed like you, Steve. Magazine, you're beautiful. They were too. The Jerrys were in all their pomp and circumstance. They couldn't believe it. Here it was Patton's 4th Armored right there, and we took that town. Now, I'm sure we had a few shots there, but one thing I remember about, and I think this is one of the occasions that I saw Patton himself, he went to church there because they had a magnificent cathedral, and the town of Sens is named after one of the Frenchmen, Sens. And he was responsible for that cathedral. It was a magnificent cathedral. Now, Orleans has a cathedral, but not the size and glory of Sens. Sens was a big community. And towns are known by their cathedrals, the size, and the glory. So is Wichita, known by its cathedral. We are having trouble now of the logistics because Patton has pushed his 4th Armored so far ahead that the 4th Armored was unable to get gasoline other than through what they call the Red Ball. That was you have a tank or a vehicle out in here that would carry the supplies. And they had guys that were capable of driving those at good speed. But that's how we got our gasoline, our water, and our food. So later on, they're flying in supplies. But logistics is the one thing that might keep an army from doing its job. As a result of that, the logistics and the fact that we were running out of gasoline because of Churchill's request to Eisenhower, and Patton still blames Montgomery for that. Montgomery was wanting help on his end of the deal. He felt that he was getting more resistance than the 12th Army under Bradley or the 3rd Army under Patton, which was not true.
Gale, let me ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Did you ever converse with Patton during the war?
I never talked to him. Never. I saw him twice.
Okay.
I yelled at him both times, and he would raise his hand or something like that. One time he even hollered back. But I never did see my commanding general. His Major General Wood is his name. I never did see him. I know he was busy. I know he was a personal friend of Patton's because Patton wanted General Wood and to form his 4th Armored Division. The 4th Armored was Patton's pet. I guess it was a pet. We took the brunt of the attack, whatever it was. We were always in the lead. Patton nicknamed us the Breakthrough Division. And that's exactly what we did. Our mission was to get through these towns, get on the other side, stop any advance if we could, because the Jerrys were running. And when we got to the point where we had to stop, that was what I call the gasoline shortage deal. I don't know if you were aware of that, but there was about a week's time, maybe a little longer, that we did nothing. We were ordered to move back and get ourselves in order. We were out of gasoline, out of food, out of ammo. And as a result of that, we really had to stop anyway. But as a result of this, that gave the Jerrys additional time to head out east, which they did do. And then we had what we called, after we finally got some of the gasoline and supplies, we had what we called the restart. Now the restart is what I call, we were ready with our full supplement of tanks. My particular platoon had 10 again. So if we had any trouble, like I had one tank shot out from me because of my tracks were shot out. And hey, if that happens, you unload because you don't move and you're a sitting duck. So I had one tank shot out there, and had a little bit of trouble in one other occasion when I had a little bit of a problem of, had an airburst of, Jerry shot a 60, probably a 60 millimeter, could have been a 120. But it was an airburst that caught me on my hand, and my finger was shot, clear, it was dangling. And I was shot with additional deal, which I'm still securing problems at the VA on my neck. So I had this neck problem. They just sewed me up there and sewed up my finger. You can still see the scar there, and you can still see the scar on my neck. But that was 72 years ago, so I had that one problem. But outside of that, we're ready to move again, and I'm ready to tell you about the Saw River area, because we're now far enough east that we're ready to board or to get across the Saw River. Prior to that, I would say roughly 4 or 4.5 miles west of the Saw River. Now my platoon was up at the edge of the river. Our assignment was to patrol that river right back there, just in case Jerry showed up, which he did not. But back about 4 miles or so was real rugged territory. It was ravines, deep ravines. It was hilly, it was forested, and the road was narrow, and our tanks had gone through there with very little trouble. But evidently the Jerry moved in because we had trouble getting some equipment there, and they shot their shells, artillery shells over there, so nobody was moving on that road. They decided on the 35th Division to send a company-size reconnaissance group. Well, they got down in that ravine all right, but they were spotted. As a result of that, the Jerrys were lobbing their airbursts and sending crossfire machine guns down in that ravine. We got, my platoon tanks got orders from 10th Armored Infantry Battalion to vacate our positions and come back and see what we could do about eliminating the Jerrys on the other side of that ravine. And that's where we would come up on the top, shoot our 75 millimeters back down so that we wouldn't get hit. And all of our tanks were short various positions there. And that's when we were able to get some ceasefire of those mortars because they were killing us. They were sending airbursts with these phosphorus shells and, of course, shrapnel everywhere, and you never really knew where you were going to get hit. So these guys were in trouble down there. My commander, who's a bird colonel, that's a full colonel.
Right.
We had light colonels that run my platoons and things. But this bird colonel got on the phone and said, we need a volunteer to go. There's everybody down there that needs to get out. I volunteered to go to get, my gunner could handle that tank. There are 4 guys in the tank. The commander really, in an operation like this, going up on the hill, shooting at the truck gun and getting back down, reloading, and then this shooting in various sequences. Hey, my loader and gunner could handle that. So I volunteered to go down there. That's when I went down and showed the guys how to get out of that ravine, but 2 of the guys were so scared that they wouldn't move, and I couldn't get them to move. So we waited till it was dark enough that they felt safe. I finally got those 2 guys out of there. As a result of that, I was pronounced to receive the Purple Heart, Silver Star for that. And that is my story on there. So we ended up getting the guys out of there, and our platoon loaded up a few of the guys on the sides of the tank because it was dark now. Jerry's weren't firing any shots. They didn't even know where we were. So we left there and went back roughly 4 miles more to a bivouac area and spent the night there.
I've got some questions to ask you, Gale. This has been awesome, you know, your presentation as one of Patton's tank commanders. How many tanks did you lose yourself? Were you able to just have just 1 tank, or did you lose more?
I lost 2.
2 tanks?
The time that we withdrew is not when there was a road that was a crossroads. We were withdrawing from this area that I was just talking about. The next 2 days later, we were withdrawing, and the Jerry, of course, he had field artillery equipment. Those 88s and 120s, hey, they could shoot those a long way. And they were powerful. But they were just lobbing these shells in on this crossroads here. And that's the only way we could get out. So the bird colonel told us to take our time, get there, get ready. And when he gave the order, since he was only guessing on how they would send these alternating shells in, is a guess. He said, I'll give you command to go. And when you go, hit the fastest you can go. Go through that. Now you can tell, I don't know if you've ever been under artillery fire or not, but if you've ever been under artillery fire, you can hear the hum of the artillery shell. If you hear that, you're safe. If you don't hear it, and you hear a thud, it's close. But anyway, I received my orders. Hey, there's no reason for me to take cover. I'm still riding up with my head, which tank commanders rarely get buttoned down. Now I did in the certain areas that I knew that they were at me, but rarely. And rarely do I ever You can't sleep in a tank. 5 guys can't sleep in a Sherman. So maybe I had maybe 5 days, nights, that I actually spent inside my Sherman. And that would have been only because it was either too snowy or too rainy. Otherwise, I dug a foxhole. That's the only way I could lay out and have any kind of rest. Because the 10th Armored guys, the personnel that took care of us tankers, they would dig foxholes all around us. I had good protection. So,
you know, Gale, you had excuse me. You had told me we met before. We visited with each other, and I remember the last that second tank you lost. I guess it was devastating, right? Did you lose the 9? Spend a lot of months in hospitals?
Yeah, I do not know. I only was told 2 days later that I lost my tank and all 4 men. That still bothers me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent 15 months recovering. Well, not that many months recovering from the shells. I was banged up real bad. But my biggest problem was I didn't realize I had trench feet. My feet were frozen and I didn't know it. And the only reason I knew it was when I woke up from 2 days later, they gave me medicine to put me out. That I had, my feet were swollen, they were black, and I didn't realize it at all. I could not walk. I could not go to the bathroom. I had trouble with bedpans. I didn't like them, but I used them. But hey, I managed. There were other guys that were worse off than me. In my hospital room, right next to me was one kid that was wounded by a Jerry Burke gun, we called them. They were machine guns that, I don't know, they were so fast that you had to be strong to control. They were, you couldn't hold them. The back kick was just right, make the riser. He had shells all over him. I know he never made it. But, yeah.
You know, Gale, you had mentioned earlier you received the Silver Star. I mean, I think from past conversations you and I had, you did receive, I think about 20 medals during the war.
20 total.
20 total medals?
Yeah. Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, Combat Infantry Badge. That's how I earned in my Grenadier days back in the Combat Infantry Badge, all kinds of victory in Europe and those kind of things that anybody that was stationed in Europe didn't have to be in combat earned those. But the main combat badges I'm very proud of, yes.
You know, you're 92 years old, right? Correct? So
92.
So I kind of do the math, Gale, and you were one of the younger World War II.
Yeah, because I was a dumb, stupid kid that volunteered for everything.
Yeah.
When they were forming tanks to leave for St. Lo, they wanted a tank commander. Shoot, I wanted to be a tank commander. They made me a tank commander. I learned on the job.
Yeah. You know, when you found out the war was over, I mean, can we talk about that a little bit when you found out the war was over?
Sure. I was in, well, therapy or whatever you want to call it, at a Carson Camp, Carson in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I knew I was never going back to service, my heavens. I couldn't walk, about like I walk now, with your help. But my biggest problems are my eyes, of which I received too many spots of little flicks of shrapnel that weren't dangerous, but they, right here is my latest deal, and I've got stitches back here, and my last operation was at the VA, 2.5 hours, and trying to get a few more of those things.
I remember one of the first times I met you, you made a comment, when I go to the VA, I do not just see one doctor, I see 5.
I have 5 doctors. Yes, I have a dental doctor, I have a skin doctor, I have a foot doctor, I have a eye doctor, and I have a person that is my, what they call PCP. She is my, I can't do anything without her doing it. Mm-hmm. She's my main doctor.
Well, good. Well, I just want to wind down here and just tell you again, thanks for your service. We can't thank you enough, Gale. And greatly appreciate what you've done.
It's my pleasure entirely, and I thank you, Steve, for hanging in with me.
Well, it's an honor, privilege, and we want your story to be told. We need to reconnect. Our country needs to reconnect with our military from the past. It really does. So you contributed heavily to this today, and we greatly appreciate that.
Well, I just want you to know that I really enjoyed my military service. I enjoyed General Patton. I know people don't like him. He uses a lot of what I call adjectives. Mm-hmm. But he was a great warrior. And he would have gone even further had they not wanted him dead.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gale.
Thank you, Steve.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.